Dun dun dun. And we're back. I know a lot of y'all hate it, but guess what? We are back with the making of the Caucasoid, Caucasian, pinkish pale, so-called white man. Inspired by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Great, written by Paul Laurence Guthrie. The most hated book in Caucasian society. Let us take a look on why they were sent to the hillsides in the Caucasus Mountains. Chapter 5. Caucasian pinkish pale man driven from civilization. 6,000 years ago, a change occurred in the civilizations of the Near East. The facts show that the cultures of that region underwent a change, a period of regression. At about the same time, Caucasians suddenly appeared in West Asia, in the area of the Caucasus Mountains. In the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or Elijah the Great, Elijah Muhammad the Great, it is implied that both of these events are related. In his writing, Muhammad the Great, Elijah the Great, speaks of a disruption that swept through the region of the Near East, in which was the result of dissatisfaction. In addition, he says the arrival of a new race, Caucasian, pinkish pale people, led to additional problems. According to Muhammad, the circumstances surrounding the presence of the Caucasians were such that soon it became necessary to remove them from among the people. So the Caucasians were driven away across the desert. Finally, Muhammad teaches they ended up in the hills and caves of West Asia. There they remained for the next 2,000 years. So as we can see right here, according to Elijah Muhammad the Great, it was because of their mistreatment or rebellion, or we would say disruption, that they were driven to the Caucasus Mountains. It wasn't by choice. They were forced to go there against their will. Now, Mr. Muhammad outlines all of these events in his book, Message to the Black Man. Personally, I believe that every melanated person on the planet should read Message to the Black Man. It is highly educational, and it sparks a thought of self-identity, of who you truly are, and who colonizers truly are. Anyway, let us continue. As to the disruption or calamity brought upon by the Caucasians during that time, Muhammad writes, they made trouble for 6 months, deceiving the ancient original people. He's talking about so-called black people, who were holy. But when they learned just who was causing the trouble, they cast the troublemakers out into the worst and poorest part of our planet. Describing what the Caucasian pinkish pale people had done to cause such trouble, Muhammad explains, they accused the righteous people, causing them to fight and kill one another. See, this is the shit they do. And then they play mediator. They'll play mediator. In other words, they'll try to become the judge while you're in court. When really they set the shit up. They put the guns in the community. They put you in a low level of survival because they have like a 350-year jump on you financially, economically, educationally. So you're already born in a impoverished community, most of us anyway. Then they play mediator. This is what they've been doing since the beginning. They play mediator. Violate all the laws, reestablish the laws, break every law known to man, and then sit themselves over the laws and judge every indigenous person according to the laws in which they have totally broken themselves to establish. So this is a part of their technology that they were taught by their father, according to Yeshua ben Pandora. He said that you are your father, the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning and a liar. He was talking to the Caucasian people. He was talking to the Caucasian Jewish people. There is no distinguishment from the Caucasian Jewish people in just a Caucasian person. A Jewish person is just attached to a religion of Judaism. That's it. It's still a form of Christianity. It's just a different branch. Anyway, let us continue so we can get down to this here troublemaker. So arguments and discord broke out between the original people, and before long, they were fighting and killing one another. These events, as Muhammad the Great states them, are consistent with the historical evidence presented in chapter 1. As to how all of this led to the driving away of the Caucasian pinkish pale people, Muhammad writes, the holy people were unable to understand just why they could not get along in peace with each other until they took the matter to the king. The king told the holy people of the black nation that the trouble they were having was caused by the Caucasian pinkish pale devils in their midst, and that there would be no peace among them until they drove these pale-skinned, pinkish made devils from among them. But before the Caucasians was driven away from civilization, the king gave instructions to the people outlining the procedures they were to follow. According to Muhammad, the king said, gather every one of the devils up and strip them of their custom. Put an apron on them and hide their shame. Pretty sure that's what he's going to say. Okay, yeah, their nakedness. Hide their nakedness. Now, before I continue with this, let me say this. That's where Freemasonry come from. They put that little bitty robe, aprons on. It's really just talking about how they really was in the Caucasus Mountains. Because they were just, they were made to only put up on a little small apron type of attire. And see the Freemasons walk on this hot burning sand to represent they was driven across the Arabian desert. I mean, they show the shit in your face if you understand the history. See, take all literature from them and take them by way of the desert. Don't allow one of them to turn back. And if they are lucky enough to get across the Arabian desert, let them go into the hills of West Asia. See that? They was acting an ass and they got treated like an ass. So, the forerunners of trouble were rounded up, stripped of all clothing, made to wear an apron, driven across the desert, and finally released into the hills of West Asia. To ensure that they would not return, guards were placed along the hills bordering the frontiers of civilization. As Elijah Muhammad the Great states, once there they were roped in to keep them out of paradise, to make sure the Muslim just means one who submits to do the will of another man, or the supreme being, or the supreme man, because this Allah fella is actually a man, according to the Bible and according to the Quran. Because it says that Allah shall sit as the judge on the day of judgment. That's in the Quran. And in the Bible it says that the Son of Man shall sit as the judge during the time of judgment. Son of man, not son of a spook, not son of a ghost, not son of a spirit. Son of a man, son of man. So Allah is the Son of Man. Anyway, so Muslim means one who surrenders their will to do the will of another man, a supreme man. Now, there we got that out the way. Let's continue. To make sure the Muslims who lived along the borders of East and West Asia were ordered to patrol the border to keep Yaqub's devils in West Asia, now called Europe, so that the original nation of black men could live in peace, and that the devils could be alone to themselves to do as they pleased, as long as they didn't try crossing the east border. Thus, shut away without proper guidance and the things to start a civilization of their own, the Caucasian pinkish pale people soon lost the knowledge of civilization and slipped into a condition of life comparable to that of the animals. They remained in a savage state for the next 2,000 years, as Muhammad states. They were punished by being deprived of divine guidance for 2,000 years, which brought them almost into the family of wild beasts, going up on all fours, eating raw and unseasoned food. Goddamn. Uncooked food. They was living that thug life. Living in caves and treetops, climbing and jumping from one tree to another. Damn. That's like some Tarzan shit. That's some monkey shit. What are the facts in this regard? Now let us take a recap right quick on something, because I want to point something out to y'all. Now if you notice, there is a part in the Bible that says that Adam he was cast out of the garden. And every time he tried to slip back in, all he found was a flaming sword. And according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he's saying that these black angels, or black people, these indigenous people, they were patrolling these borders. And every time one of the Caucasians tried to slip back in, they would knock their head off with a sword. Now this aligns with biblical scripture. Just thought I'd throw that in there right quick because it made me think of some shit. All right, ancient writings agree with Muhammad. The presence of the Caucasians in the region of the Near East, the description caused by their presence in the way in which they were rounded up and driven away from the people is reflected in many of the writings of the ancient world. Woo, let's see what they talking about. Preserved in a Shahnameh, okay, chapter 1 introduced a number of traditional accounts of the ancient world. One of those accounts, the Shahnameh, talked about the birth of an unusual white-skinned, pinkish-pale child who had been driven away and abandoned in the vicinity of the Caucasus Mountains. We compared the account with the sudden appearance of the Caucasian pinkish-pale people in the area of the Caucasus Range and showed how the child functioned as a symbolic figure and that the story of his life recounts the early history of Caucasian people. In light of the teachings of Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad the Great, and as the facts will lately show, this account presents an accurate portrayal of the early history of the Caucasian race who, due to a calamity, were stripped of their clothing, removed from association with men, and released to live naked and without shelter in the hills of West Asia. Recorded in the writings of Diodorus. Here we go with the scholarship. The events outlined of the Shahnameh are also summarized in other sources. Such sources likewise record a series of events identical to those taught by Elijah Muhammad the Great. One example appears in the writings of Diodorus. Diodorus, the ancient writer, admits to having copied his account from even earlier records that had been kept by the ancient Egyptians, or Kemites. Okay, Diodorus says the following: the appearance, ruddy-skinned strangers. Egypt began to suffer from a multitude of troubles and diseases. According to the words of Diodorus, the original people of the land decided that the only way to put an end to their troubles was to round up all of the strangers that they could find and drive them out across the border. Concerning what happened, Diodorus writes, when in ancient times a pestilence arose in Egypt, the common people ascribed their trouble to the workings of a divine agency. For indeed, with many strangers of all sorts dwelling in their midst, the natives of the land submissed that unless they removed the foreigners, their troubles would never be resolved. At once, therefore, the aliens were driven from the country. Aren't the words of this ancient account identical to what Elijah Muhammad the Great says happened 6,000 years ago following the arrival of the Caucasian pinkish pale people among the original people? Now y'all see how identical that is? How Diodorus' story aligns directly with the most honorable Elijah Muhammad? Huh? So the scholarship is impeccable. As to the identity of those strangers, Diodorus refers to them in another place as a race of lepers. Huh? And as people having white marks on their skin. Okay? Then he goes on to say in another book, Diodorus wrote, for by way of purging the country, all persons who had white or lepers marks on their bodies had been assembled and driven across the border, as being under a curse. What Diodorus here calls white or leprous marks on their bodies is shown in his other writings as well as by the writings of Manetho, the Egyptian priest, to have been in reference to people having white or pale complexions. Many of the writings of the ancient Egyptians, Hebrews, Greeks, and others refer to white or pale complexion skin as a form of leprosy, a disease characterized by skin ulcers and pigmentary deficit. The word pestilence, used in the translation of Diodorus' earlier accounts, describe the state of affairs brought on by the presence of the strangers. To that extent, pestilence simply means a nuisance. God damn. Related sources shows that in ancient times, acts of mischief or nuisance were also viewed as symptoms of a disease. I'll be damned. Since Diodorus uses the word pestilence to describe the troubles that the original people sought to resolve, it is clear that a nuisance or state of mischief is intended. All in all, Diodorus' accounts, written thousands of years ago, presents a series of historical events identical in every other way to those outlined by the teachings of Elijah Muhammad the Great. They speak of the early presence of a group of white-skinned strangers in a region of the Near East. The troubles that began following their arrival in the way in which the white-skinned strangers were rounded up and driven away from the region. How well do the events listed in the accounts of Diodorus and the Shahnameh compare with the story of Adam and Eve? Ooh, y'all check this shit out. Just let me go and tell you right now. If you're at a point to where you can't handle this shit and your brain cells is getting overwhelmed and your nervous system is going in shock and you're having anxiety attacks because this truth is coming like a piercing light, you might want to log off right now because this shit is getting extra heavy. So I'm just letting you know, now's your time to click off. But if not, and your mind is open for this truth of the hidden history of the Caucasian people, stay tuned. But if you got some coon in you, you got some of that old Tom in you, go on, get your ass away from here right now. But if you're looking for truth of knowledge of history that you've never been taught in school, stay tuned. Now let's go. Facts consist with the story of Adam and Eve. So now this is the book of Genesis 3 and 24. So he drove out the man. So he's saying he drove Adam out because you know Adam represents a race of people. Adam and Eve represents a race of people. So like they'd be like the Chinese is Adam and an Eve, the Japanese is Adam and an Eve. The so-called black people are pre-Adamites because we predate all other races by millions of years, billions of years, and according to Elijah Muhammad, trillions of years. We've been here. Now, let's get there. Similar points appear in the Bible story of Adam and Eve. According to the Bible, Adam was driven out of paradise. But as to where he went and how he got there, the Bible is silent. That's true. The Bible definitely does not tell you where they went. Still, it is relevant to ask, what happened to Adam and Eve after they left the Garden of Eden? Were they forced to walk across the desert? Were they destined to live out the rest of their lives in the darkness of a cave? If it can be shown that these things are true, then wouldn't this be convincing evidence in support of the teachings of Muhammad? The book of Adam and Eve. In Ethiopia, a group of 9th century explorers uncovered a very ancient document. Hey, listen, y'all. This is in Ethiopia. Listen. A group of 9th century explorers uncovered a very ancient document called the Book of Adam and Eve. Oh shit. Remember I told y'all this is about to get heavy. Now, where we at? Originally written in Arabic, the text had long ago been translated into Ethiopic. Now we know that Aramaic is like the oldest language on the planet. See, originally written in Arabic. Now, Arabic is an offshoot of Aramaic. So, let's see what the scholars got to say. The scholars who first studied it were quick to point out the parts of the text appear in the Holy Quran, in the Talmud, and elsewhere, showing the vital role it has played in the original literature of human wisdom. Of great significance is the fact that the book of Adam and Eve picks up where the book of Genesis leaves off. In other words, it traces the lives of Adam and Eve from the day they left Eden. And amazingly, it talks about their being forced to walk across the desert. It also describes them living inside the cave that had become their home. As to the fact that the ancient record speaks of Adam and Eve as having been forced to walk across a desert, the text acknowledges. You hear this? This coming out of the book of Adam and Eve, written from some scholars in the 9th century in Ethiopia. Oh yeah. But when our father Adam and Eve went out of the garden, they trod the ground on their feet. And when they came to the opening of the gate of the garden and saw the broad earth spread before them, covered with stones, large and small, and with sand, they feared and trembled. Now this is supposed to be coming out of the text. That's coming out of the text. See, it's saying when our fathers, Adam and Eve, went out of the garden. They tried the ground on their feet and they found out they was in damn caves. And they was strict with fear because they was up in there by themselves with no guidance, no food. They had to get it how they live. They had no clothes, no nothing. They knew they was there for punishment, for transgression. Now, let's continue. And as much as a wide space of earth covered with stone and sand is, by definition, a desert. And since to trod the ground on their feet means they had to walk, then the only reasonable explanation that can be given to these words is that Adam and Eve were driven out of the garden. They were forced to walk across the desert. These facts agree with Elijah Muhammad. But where did Adam's journey across the desert lead him? And did he end up living in a cave? The book of Adam and Eve states that at the end of his trip across the desert, Adam looked down. He looked down at the uncommon character of his skin and lamented over the trouble that his mischief had gotten him into. In other words, he looked at that skin and seen all them blisters where the sun had been tearing his ass up from walking across that hot Arabian desert. You see, that vampire shit real. The sun be frying motherfuckers. Now let's keep going. Let's continue. I know y'all motherfuckers hate it. I know y'all hate it. But guess what? Bitch, you gonna keep getting this work. I know y'all hate it. But guess what? You gonna get this work. Anyway, let's go. Compared with everyone else. Wait a minute. Wait. Let's go back. Make sure we got it. Oh, we don't want to leave none of this out. None of this out. Okay? Adam looked down at the uncommon character of his skin. And the boy started lamenting over the trouble that his mischief had gotten him into. Compared with everyone else, Adam's skin looked pale and different. This is also the point at which the text first mentions his destination, a cave. Oh shit. Ooh, a cave. This is where the criminal mindset started. Here are the facts as they have been preserved in the book of Adam and Eve. And indeed, when Adam looked at his flesh that was altered, he wept bitterly. You damn right he did, because that sun was wearing his ass out. They ain't had none of that suntan, sunscreen shit like they got today. Okay, he and Eve, because they're talking about the whole race when they say he and Eve. They're talking about the men and the women and the children. He and Eve, over what they had done, they all shit wept bitterly. And as they came to it, Adam wept himself and said to Eve, look at this cave that is to be our prison in this world, in a place of punishment. So all this shit lined up directly with what Elijah Muhammad said, where they went for causing mischief amongst the indigenous original people of the land. So they were sent across the hot sand Arabian desert and sent to the hillsides of the Caucasus Mountains in West Asia. So this shows that after they were forced out of the Garden of Eden and made to walk across the desert, Adam and Eve had to live in a cave, according to Elijah Muhammad. The story of Adam and Eve represents the early history of the Caucasian race. See, we the pre-Adamites. In the Bible where it says, let us make man in our image. Us is talking about us, so-called black people, men and women. That's us. Let us make men in our image. We made them in our image. This is why we're the only race that have woolly hair. Nobody else has woolly hair. We made everybody else in our image. They made in our image. We the gods. Okay, it only makes sense this way. How else can you make sense of this shit? We are the only humans, unless our DNA has been tainted by a foreigner that is outside of our original blueprint or genetic makeup. Okay? Let us continue though. Could the many similarities which exist between the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and what was recorded thousands of years ago in the book of Adam and Eve be the result of mere coincidence? Hell no. Or is it more likely that there is more depth to the teachings of Muhammad than some have been willing to admit? See, I don't want to give Elijah no credit. They don't want to give him no credit that he was taught by somebody full of wisdom. Okay, other verses show us what it was like on the inside of Adam's cave. Man, I got to get this book, the book of Adam and Eve. It say, Adam raised his eyes and saw the rock in the roof of the cave that covered him overhead, so that he could see neither heaven nor God's creatures. When in it, Adam couldn't even see Eve. They had no flashlight. They didn't know how to make a fire. until Akhenaten came in there and taught them how to, you know, become more civilized. Akhenaten, aka Moses, Moses. Look, he only heard the noises she made. She was up in that bitch grunting. Well, not at first, but they started grunting after 1,000 years because they lost their way. Neither could she see Adam, but heard the noise he made. Then Adam wept in deep affliction and smote upon his breast. That nigga start beating his chest like a gorilla. And he arose and said to Eve, "Where art thou?" And she said unto him, "Lo, I am standing in this darkness. Oh, Adam, I'm scared. Help me, Adam. I can't see nothing. Oh, Lord, look, I see eyes. Must be an animal. Eyes are glowing in the dark. Hold me, Adam, hold me." His scary ass, he probably ran and hid behind a rock too. Anyway, Elijah Muhammad teaches that 6,000 years ago, the Caucasian race was driven away from the region of the Near East into the hills and caves of West Asia. He asserts that the early history of the Caucasian is outlined in the story of Adam and Eve. The facts show how closely the story of Adam and Eve conforms to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad the Great. After reviewing the ancient record and comparing it with the sudden and unexplainable appearance of Caucasian people in the area north of the Caucasus Mountains, it is reasonable to conclude that the book of Adam and Eve agrees with Muhammad. Now we're going to leave it right here because I don't want to give y'all too much because I know a lot of y'all infuriated. Caucasians, that is. Some of y'all actually appreciate, the historical lesson in which y'all are getting so y'all can understand where y'all come from. And where y'all and how y'all got where y'all got, why y'all have acted the way y'all have acted. Your ancestors came up in a very harsh climate. It came up in a very harsh environment, okay? And I know a lot of y'all indigenous people should appreciate this so we can finally understand history of why it's been the way it's been. Well, I'm going to leave it right here, but y'all stay tuned because we ain't done yet.